The digital transition. The Digital Transition, brought to you by Fulton Trotter Digital, a podcast series created to assist those tasked with implementing digital strategies, where we will share our knowledge and experiences to support you in your transition.
So welcome to the Digital Transition, podcast number 1. I'm your host, Nathan Hildebrandt, and today I'll give you an insight into who I am and why I created this podcast series. To help me out with the podcast today, I have to thank Campo Campion for taking the time to sit with me today. Now, we'll start off this podcast. We'll get a little bit of insight into Campo, and he can share with us a little bit about himself so that people are listening can learn about who he is.
Thanks, Nathan. Well, I've been in radio for around 32 years. I've worked in Sydney and Brisbane for predominantly most of my radio career. I've moved to Ipswich about 4 years ago, so I've been here doing a breakfast show with Marnie. And prior to that, I was with 97.3 for about 15 years. And prior to that, I was with B105, which is now Hit 105. So I've had a lot of experience in radio and production. And, you know, I've done a little bit of foray into podcasting as well. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
It seems to be the perfect person or the expert to guide me along and potentially show me how to do this right and probably kick me in the arse if I do it wrong.
Nathan, you've had an interesting journey to get where you are. To give people more of an understanding of who you are, what are some of the key points you think have gotten you where you are today?
So I guess I'll start at the end point first, which it sounds a bit unusual, but currently I'm a registered architect in Queensland and New South Wales. So that's kind of my primary skill and talents. But going back kind of to the start, as a young boy, I spent a lot of time on site with my father, who was a plumber. I enjoyed designing cubby houses when I was in primary school, so I kind of had a passion for architecture as a young child, which, you know, you look at a number of people that struggle to actually find a vocation when they're at the end of high school. So I kind of had my direction early. It was very interesting. Probably university's probably gotten me the most where I am today, in the sense that it had its bumps, you know, but I guess there was one key moment where I was in second year and one of my tutors told me that I have to stop using hand drawings to present my ideas, because my drawings weren't good enough. She kind of said they were crap.
Right.
And from that, I kind of looked at methodologies, I guess, of which I could present my ideas and my designs. And I adopted, I guess, skills in software to, you know, and BIM authoring software to succeed. Now, from that, I joined Fulton Trotter Architects. And because we adopted a new software called ArchiCAD, and I had previous experience using that software before I started with the practice because of my university problems. I was a fifth-year student in architecture, and I was our CAD manager for our practice, which is a huge responsibility. So it was getting those opportunities to take the responsibility as a young kind of architectural student. I think from that, I always kind of pushed myself very hard and self-taught myself in all these different tools to become experts. Now, because of that, I've had great opportunities where I presented at conferences all over the world, presented at major events with 300 to 400 people, which are exciting and exhilarating. At the same time, pushed myself because I saw gaps in a market where I actually ran my own conference, and 96 people turned up in Brisbane. But when you kind of pull all that as a mix together, and through the architectural training, what it's actually taught me is it's taught me how to solve complex problems. And I guess that's through my architectural training, but also in terms of teaching myself how to use specific tools. I guess the most important thing from my perspective, from my career to date, has actually been all about delivering great architectural projects for our great clients as part of the work we do at Fulton Trotter.
Nathan, you're currently a director at Fulton Trotter Architects. Who is Fulton Trotter Architects, and what is your role in the practice?
So Fulton Trotter Architects is a practice that has over 70 years of history. We specialise in aged care, education and health architecture and essentially community architecture. Our focus is on work that essentially builds a community or assists, you know, community type work and not for profit. We found that type of work, I guess, is most rewarding because it tends to give most back to people. My role within the practice, as you stated in the question, I am a director within the practice, but I also lead another brand within our practice apart from running our architectural team called Fulton Trotter Digital. And within that brand, we're looking to essentially provide services to clients with respect to BIM and essentially trying to help clients with their digital transition.
What is BIM and what does it mean to you?
So the true term of BIM, I guess, translating it from an acronym, is Building Information Modelling. In a kind of a short answer, BIM means to me better information management. And from that, I guess, we're trying to find methodologies from which we can make the transfer of information between all stakeholders throughout the design, construction and operation of buildings a lot easier, and essentially trying to improve the way in which information's, I guess, transferred and then found and retrieved when needed.
You're involved in a number of industry groups. Which ones are you part of and why?
So currently I'm a member of a number of industry groups, and I guess I've been a member of all these industry groups purely because I'm trying to assist industry move forward and get equipped to be able to handle these new processes. Currently, I'm the chair of Brisbane. I'm also a chair of ACA Queensland Northern Territory and the AIA Queensland BIM Task Force, and also a committee member of BILT. So I have a variety of roles all up. If I go into a bit more detail regarding each of those different organisations and what they do and the benefits, I guess, that they bring to industry, or for the people that are listening, they might be of interest to them in terms of understanding what we're doing. Starting off with Brisbane. Brisbane is a bi-monthly free event that's held at QUT Gardens Point. It is an event that has been running now for 6 years, and I've been a part of it for about 5.5 years and taken over the chair role in the last 12 months. Basically, it's an event that occurs on Wednesday night, and it starts at about 5:30 in the evening. And we have about an hour worth of presentations that cover a variety of different kind of focuses. We may have strategic presentations, technical presentations, and typical case studies. So the idea is trying to have a broad mix of people's experiences where they share the type of problems that they would have faced during the implementations or during working in utilising BIM processes. Now, being a free event, it's a good kind of insight or a good stepping stone to actually getting your toes wet, I guess, per se, in terms of going into this. You know, an hour of presentations, an hour of networking with free beer and pizza, I don't think people will complain too much.
So what is BILT?
So BILT is a conference, an annual conference that is run across Australasia. And I've been a part of that for a couple of years now. I joined RTC, which is an event management company that runs BILT now. The year after I started my own conference, I decided to hand over the reins of my conference so that it would become less stressful. But essentially the work that I did with my own conference essentially became a stream within BILT. BILT is a conference, I guess, that focuses on buildings, infrastructure, life cycle, and technology. And so it's kind of another acronyms everywhere within our environment. But it's a 3-day conference that has sometimes between 9 to 10 streams running concurrently, mainly with 75-minute sessions. So the idea is that there's types of sessions that people would experience at BILT will be technical in nature, so we can actually learn how to use the specific tools to actually deliver projects. We have management-based sessions, so that people that are experts within the technical side and that side of the conference doesn't have as much meaning to them anymore. So they actually want to start to learn about how to manage people and how to manage transition, how to manage change. And then we also have sessions that are relevant for asset owners, which is kind of, I guess, the purpose of what we're talking about today with this podcast series as well.
What is a digital transition and how does it relate to BIM?
So the digital transition, from my perspective, I guess, is a mindset change, and it's a mindset change with regards to the way in which we procure and operate our buildings. The digital transition, how it relates to BIM directly, I guess, is kind of the two words could be interchanged, because BIM is essentially a process, and a digital transition, in my perspective, I guess, is taking the steps from a non-BIM process environment to actually working in a BIM environment. And I think it's very important, I guess, for people to work through those steps and understand the benefits that they're going to receive.
Why have you created this podcast series?
This is a really good question, Campo, and I guess, the crux of why we're chatting today. We wouldn't be chatting today if I didn't have this series or weren't interested in putting it together. But the key thing from my perspective is that I believe that many people that are managing assets or have the responsibility for making the determination as to whether or not a business is going to make a digital transition are very busy and time poor. They've got enough on their plate trying to do their daily job as it is currently, and don't have the time to kind of, have full day out at a conference initially. They want to understand the basics. They don't want to be sold all the jargon they get sold from a software salesperson. So from my perspective, what I've tried to do is create a series, or what will be curating over the next 12 months, is a podcast series that will take the step-by-step kind of approach in each episode, where we will kind of pull apart and explain in plain English each of the kind of minute kind of issues that they'll face with regards to making their decisions in terms of actually doing it, and hopefully being within a 30-minute time slot, from which we can then listen to it on a commute to work, or while they're at the gym. Hopefully it can be that exciting that don't put you to sleep on a treadmill.
So who do you think should be listening to it?
So from my perspective, I guess what I see this podcast being highly relevant will be for representatives of asset owners, or people that are in the operations and maintenance phase, that are currently working utilising old paper methodologies, but also just as important as people that are in procurement. We find in working with some government agencies in the past that essentially the procurement team would work in isolation to the team that are in operations and maintenance, and the needs of people within operations and maintenance would never communicate to those in procurement. So therefore, they'd never get what they needed and in the format that they needed. So ideally, any asset owner representatives that are involved in the supply and delivery chain would be it's most beneficial.
Now, what are the topics that you will be covering throughout the series?
At this point in time, we've just had an interview with Andrew Curthoys from the Queensland State Government to talk about the recently released BIM policy that came out in November. We're also going to be talking to David Phelps from the UK and talking to them about the process and the experiences that they have had over the last couple of years with the mandate that they've had over there. Then we're going to be talking to a series of other key industry leaders, and the key industry leaders will include people from NatSpec. They'll include people that are specialists in open BIM. We'll talk to people about level of development in terms of the views on how we build models in terms of the virtual model environment. And we'll also talk to people, including Rob Jackson from Bond Bryan Digital, about the methodologies of specifying your information requirements and ensuring that you get them. Now that's obviously only a short list of the people that we plan to talk to, but over the next 12 months we'll see a number of extra people added to that list.
And how many podcasts are you planning to release?
So we're looking to release 20 podcasts as part of this series. Now what we're going to do is release them on a fortnightly basis. Okay, so the idea is that we want our listeners to progressively learn BIM and take it in bite-sized chunks. We don't want people to have to be bogged down in large amounts of information all at once. So by releasing the 20 podcasts on a fortnightly cycle over the March to November time frame, we'll give people a good kind of progression to learn the kind of basics. And then what we're going to do at the end of the year is we're going to review kind of the responses we get from our listeners in the comments that we have on our website or through social media or even through direct feedback. And then I guess from that we'll actually then target specific people and topics to talk to for our series that we create next year. And the idea will be is that we'll release series 2 hopefully in 2020 with another 20 podcast series.
Sounds fantastic. Well, thank you so much for today, Nathan.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Campo, for taking the time to sit down with me and extracting the answers from me. To the listeners, thanks for taking the time to listen all the way through to the end of our first podcast. In anticipation for your excitement, we also have the release of an additional podcast for you to listen to. So we have our interview with Andrew Curthoys from the Queensland Government, also included on our website. So he's going to be talking about the recently released BIM policy and what it means to industry. So thanks once again, and I hope that you learned a little bit about me today. And I look forward to sharing our next podcast with you in a fortnight's time. Until then, good luck with your digital transition.
If you would like assistance with your digital transition, please contact us at digital@fultontrotter.com.au. For more information, or if you'd like to continue the discussion in the comments section, head over to our website, thedigitaltransition.com. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on future podcasts. We would also appreciate it if you provide us with a rating and take the time to provide us with a review. Thanks for listening to The Digital Transition, brought to you by Fulton Trotter Digital. The Digital Transition.